Hello punks, my name is Tony. Way back in 1971, a film was released that changed everything. In the same way that nearly a decade earlier, Dr. No had redefined the action-adventure movie and set the benchmark for the creative geography of the future, Dirty Harry did so for the modern urban action thriller. It threw the detective story, the police procedural, neo-noir styling, city-based gun and chase action into a blender, hit the switch, and reconfigured the entire landscape of the cinema. There was no going back. Now, I don't intend to hack through the narrative of the film in infinite detail, and I don't want to dwell too much on the legendary and endlessly quotable "Do I feel lucky? Well, do ya, punk?" soliloquies.
Do I feel lucky? Well, do you, punk?
That's been done to death, and most of us know this stuff inside and out. I'm more interested in exploring the internal and external architecture, the creative soul, and the lasting influence of the piece, expressing some opinions on the core components, the essentials that make Dirty Harry such a great, compelling, timeless movie experience. So I'll freestyle my way through it, and you good people can come along for the ride, or choose to opt out at any time. So, pilgrims, let's just see how it goes and where it leads. Sometimes in life, shit just falls into place, resulting in a perfect storm that works on multiple levels. Dirty Harry, by default more than design, is that type of phenomenon. It started life as an original screenplay by Rita M. Fink and Harry Julian Fink, a husband and wife writing team. It was titled Dead Right. There were 4 or 5 drafts kicking around. John Milius and Terrence Malick were involved in the scripting process at some stage or other, and the action was originally set in New York. Producer Jennings Lang held the rights but couldn't get it off the ground, so he sold it to ABC Television, who suddenly realised to their surprise they bought something that was too violent and controversial for a TV show. You don't say! And in turn flogged it to Warner Brothers. Not the most auspicious of starts. Warner's hit a snag. They couldn't seem to get a high-profile actor interested in taking the lead role of homicide detective Inspector Harry Callahan. They tried Frank Sinatra, John Wayne, Steve McQueen, Robert Mitchum, George C. Scott, Marlon Brando, and Paul Newman. They all turned it down, image being their primary consideration. They all seemed to feel that playing the role might damage their carefully cultivated screen images in some way or other, or the character or subject matter didn't sit comfortably with some of their pussy-ass liberal consciences and limp blanket political belief systems, except perhaps in the Duke's case, who may have thought the character wasn't quite right-wing enough. Whatever, a pungent whiff of egocentric hypocrisy underscored their concerns. It was Paul Newman who suggested it would be a fitting role for Clint Eastwood. You know, sort of like, as we're all too high and mighty, principled, cultivated and clean for it, but him, he's not like us. It's his sort of thing. Faint disparagement might have been the intention, but as it turns out, Eastwood was not only the right choice, he was also the perfect choice. He didn't have a psychological share in the superstar superego collective, didn't care that he wasn't first pick. He looked at the script, saw the potential, figured out how to work it, insisted they go back to the first original draft, relocate the action to San Francisco, and hire his friend and mentor Don Siegel to direct it, and produce the film through his own company Malpaso. Warner's literally said, "Okay, do what you want to do." And that's what they did, on a budget of $4 million. It took 7 times that budget in the US alone, and history was made. Thumbnail plot then. Inspector Harry Callahan is a ruthless homicide detective with some questionable methods that get results but don't win him any Mr. Popular awards with his superiors. He has nothing but contempt for bureaucracy and criminals alike and pushes the boundaries in his mission to protect and serve. He carries the most powerful handgun he can legally get hold of, a Smith & Wesson Magnum 44, and has no qualms about using it. A serial killer calling himself Scorpio is holding the city to ransom, murdering people at random with a sniper rifle. He wants a $100,000 payoff to stop. Eventually he escalates to kidnapping a teenage girl and burying her alive. He wants $200,000 or he will let her die. Callahan and his new partner Gonzalez are assigned to the case. That's as much of the plot as I'm going to cite, because what makes this film so special is so much more important to understand, and that's what I'm going to try and examine. The script is tight, whip-smart, incident-packed and light on its feet. Dialogue-wise, it bristles with quotable lines and memorable discourse, which enhances characterization no end. It makes clear that the main character earned his nickname because he's the type of troubleshooting wildcard who gets all the dirty jobs, the dangerous cases, the tough nuts to crack no one else wants to touch, with the Eiffel Tower on the end of a fucking big barge pole. The posters say it best. You don't assign him to a murder case, you just turn him loose. Despite the film being 50 years old, Bruce Surtees' cinematography achieves a remarkable feat. Dirty Harry still looks dynamic and current. Even though it's visually very much reflective of the early 70s, it looks so crisp, clean and startlingly vivid that it remains fresh and vibrant to the eye. Despite the fashions and the vehicles and the language, the impression it gives is it could have been filmed yesterday. It sports an enduring sheen that has worn extremely well. Lalo Schifrin provides a stunning musical score, all taut, funky drum, bass and string patterns with eerie a cappella vocalizations that could raise the hairs on the neck of a dead wildebeest. It's a thing of great sonic beauty and is instantly recognizable whenever you hear it again. Director Don Siegel is at his most stylish and composed, completely in command, with a masterful grip on framing the action and nailing down the performances of his impressive cast. He'd been building up to this moment with two 60s dry runs, Madigan with Richard Widmark and Coogan's Bluff with Eastwood. Both were urban cop flicks that tried different approaches and constitute decent workouts for the main event. Talking of which, let's see who's doing what. Eastwood was a major star at the start of the 70s, but he entered the decade in experimental mode. His directorial debut, Play Misty for Me, was the template for all those fatal attractions to follow. However, at the time it seemed to hold more appeal for the art house crowd than the mainstream. Same could be said of his foray into American Gothic, The Beguiled, also directed by Siegel, which was a bit off the beaten track for the masses to take to their fickle hearts. Dirty Harry was the one that raised his profile into the stratosphere. It cemented his status as one of the most popular mainstream actors of all time, cast his anti-hero persona as a truly contemporary phenomenon. It was groundbreaking stuff. A hero who blurred the distinction between law enforcer and criminal, who does the right things for the right reasons, but often in the wrong way. A widower, a loner, as much a force of nature as anything else, whose past is littered with a string of wounded or dead partners who paid the price for working alongside him. Eastwood is ultra cool, laconic, cynical, in a supremely confident tour de force performance that comes close to being his best acting work. To say he owns it is an understatement and then some. Andrew Robinson as Scorpio is a revelation, a scruffy, psychotic hippie gone bad, so convincingly loathsome that the actor received death threats after the film's release. Ironic, considering Robinson was a liberal pacifist with a gun phobia. But then that's what acting's all about, pretending to be something you're not, yeah? And Robinson is so astonishingly good at it, he deservedly landed a high ranking on any list of top movie bad guys of all time, an iconic piece of work in the annals of cinematic villainy. So much so that when Harry tortures a confession out of him, grinding his foot into the wound on his leg in the middle of an empty floodlit football stadium, you really get a cold blast of grim satisfaction from it. The supporting cast is structurally excellent. Harry Gardino as Harry's commanding officer, Rennie Santoni as Harry's new partner Chico, John Vernon as the mayor, and John Mitchum as Frank DiGiorgio, Harry's cop colleague. Some great character actors doing some great character acting. Notable mentions must also go to Albert Popwell as the luckless bank robber Harry delivers his first punk soliloquy to, and Raymond Johnson as the slick and super cool heavy Scorpio pays to beat him up to frame Harry. Small parts, but striking and priceless in the tone and context of the overall tapestry. There is a rich vein of black humour threading through the narrative. Harry getting mistaken for a peeping Tom.
How's he peeping, Tom? You getting an eyeful, you goddamn pie hawker? We ought to call the police. I am a police. Oh.
His unique way of talking down a would-be suicide jumper.
Don't you try to get me.
Not me, no. You're the one who wants to get yourself killed, not me. Always happens with you guys, you know? Last minute, you always want to grab onto somebody, take somebody with you. Down you go. Not me, brother.
His explanation to the mayor of his shooting of a suspect.
I don't want any more trouble like you had last year in the Fillmore district. Understand? That's my policy.
Yeah, well, when an adult male is chasing a female with intent to commit rape, I shoot the bastard. That's my policy.
Intent? How did you establish that?
Well, a naked man is chasing a woman through an alley with a butcher knife and a heart on. I figure he isn't out collecting for the Red Cross.
I think he's got a point.
His rationale as to why he couldn't have beaten up Scorpio.
And anybody can tell I didn't do that to him.
How?
Because he looks too damn good, that's how.
They help counterbalance the darker moments, and they don't get much darker than when the body of the kidnapped teenage girl is located and removed from the shallow grave where she has been abandoned by Scorpio to suffocate to death. The end game is a marvelous set piece, a textbook example of action, tension and suspense. Scorpio hijacks a busload of school kids at gunpoint, making ludicrous demands for money and a plane to fly him out of the country. As he grows ever more deranged, terrorizing the kids and the driver, Harry intercepts him by jumping from a low bridge onto the roof of the bus. It concludes in a classic gunfight and confrontation, followed by Harry throwing his police badge into the river. The absolute epitome of super chilled movie climax cool. On a socio-political level, the hippies, liberals, left-wing elitists and radical feministas were outraged, labelling the film fascist. Just goes to show that snowflakery ain't nothing new. There have always been humorless killjoys, the real fascist arseholes, out to call the shots on what supposedly free people should and should not, can and cannot see and do and enjoy. But I do get how Dirty Harry presents as uncomfortable viewing for some, because it dares to pose the dangerous question to the audience: who would you want between you and a murderous, unrepentant psycho like Scorpio? Some bleeding heart liberal wet wipe more concerned with the perp's human rights than yours, or Inspector Harry Callahan? In The Dark Night of the Soul, the honest answer would represent a difficult wake-up call for the most resolute and rabid virtue-signalling SJW. If they were into honest answers, of course. No wonder they hated it. It does pose something of a challenge. Most thinkers who can think thoughts and stuff know it's make-believe, a fantasy, not real. Most can tell the difference between a movie and reality. Dirty Harry, at its core, functions as near-perfect, visceral entertainment that manages to be thrilling, thought-provoking and confrontational. Imagine a detective action thriller with content that thrilled and stimulated in a new and adult way. That's exactly what Dirty Harry did. I first saw it in either late 72 or early 73, and it was a wholly electrifying experience. Even at that young and tender age, I realised it wasn't a serious manifesto on how policing and the justice system should be. It was a light show posing the question: what if, once upon a time, the good guy was a hair's breadth away from being a bad guy, and the bad guy was one of the baddest bad guys ever? Slap that premise into a slick, stylish, supercharged police thriller, and let's have some wicked fun with it. Dirty Harry is a classic and a game changer of lasting influence, and the passage of time has never diminished it in any way. There's talk of a remake or reboot or rehash, and chances are someone is going to do it. I sincerely hope they don't bother, but I'm not so naive as to imagine it won't come to pass. The sheer horror of what happened with Get Carter will haunt me forever. For that reason, no matter how curious I get, I will avoid it. I don't want to see Dwayne Johnson or Vin Diesel playing Harry Callahan any more than I want to see Peter Dinklage playing James Bond. I have my versions, and I'm keeping them close. I've got the very best, and whilst I do, I'm not going to waste my time on any errant shit, no matter how it's repackaged or by who. Thank you for your time and attention, especially if you stuck with it. I'm grateful. Please feel free to like, don't like, leave a comment, subscribe, or maybe even suggest some options for future review. I might never get round to them, but what have you got to lose, eh? Meanwhile, here's a song called Perish in the Thought. Breaking down in a border town with ravens in the road. The science leaves much to desire. The sun bleeds rays on the dying days. The passage of time is slowed. Autumn is painted with fire. Oh no, rough night in Jericho. The captives cherishing the court. You know I couldn't let it go. Your beauty perish in the thought. Queensland to a desert land where coals are never needed. The genie is out of the land. Diamond ring and a scorpion sting, warnings go unneeded. Always a spy in the camp. Oh no, rough night in Jericho. The captives cherishing the cold. You know I couldn't let it go. Your beauty perish in the cold. Saber jets and exotic pets and model girls on runways. Uranium pushing up the beat. Breaking bread with the good and dead on every napalm Sunday. Wiping the dust from your feet. Oh no, rough night in Jericho. The captives cherishing the cold. You know I couldn't let it go. Your beauty perish in the cold. Oh no, rough night in Jericho. The captives cherishing the gold. You know I couldn't let it go. Your beauty perish in the cold.